Hello there, this is Rom Wills coming back at you with yet another podcast. Women can program themselves to find certain men attractive. Now, I promised y'all I was going to get into some deep stuff, and people who follow me on, especially on my Raw site, know I can go way deeper than I generally do. And in fact, I used to go deep. Gone deep with some of my on-demand stuff. So I'm going to give you a taste of what I can get into, right? Now, the topic is women can program themselves to find certain men attractive. Now, understand something. We have all this stuff about evolutionary psychology and all of that. And, women checking for dudes with certain body builds and all of that. Studies have proven it out. But there's also more to the equation. The social environment, the cultural environment, the class environment also shapes who a woman is aroused by. Right? Now, the key to understanding that is understanding the phenomenon of sexual repression. Now, for those who are familiar with some of my deeper stuff, I've talked about there's two basic sex drives out there. There's the more spiritual sex drive. That's that drive to connect with somebody on a non-carnal level, so to speak. It's still sexual in nature, but it's more like the companionship friend, the friend zone type of thing, where you're connecting with somebody mentally. But then there's also the more carnal, lustful sex drive that people are familiar with. Now, at any given time, 99.99% of the population is suppressing one or the other. Even though some people like to think otherwise, very few people are totally balanced. So they're either going one way or the other. A significant amount of women out here. Now, just to be clear, for some women listening, because, you always get someone who says, what about the men? It happens with men, too. But the title is Women Can Program Themselves to Find Certain Men Attractive. Right? I'd say a significant amount of the women are sexually repressed to some degree. And sexually repressed in the direction of repressing the carnal sex drive. Still want to have sex, but then there has to be some conditions that are met, right? Now, what does this mean? It means, in simple terms, that a significant amount of women out here can't be turned on sexually by a man unless he meets certain conditions. Now, one of the greatest examples of this, and I've used this in my book, Sexual Chemistry, is when a woman who has she has a condition, her condition for getting turned on by a man, that he's rich, right? So when she is around some men she believes are rich, she will walk and behave in a seductive manner. She'll walk slower, she'll have that, that butt on her be switching, right? She'll be receptive to their approach. But then if the same woman walks among a group of men who she perceived to be poor, she's going to be very defensive. Now, here's the irony of it. In both groups, there are men who are compatible to her. And then, of course, men who are not compatible to her. And in that way, she might lose out on a decent guy. And also, it's based on her perceptions. Like, there could be men among the group she perceives as poor who actually have money, and men among the group she perceives as rich who are fronting, right? But it is something that's there. Now, understand, this programming starts from the moment a woman is born. And you see it depending on the neighborhood they grow up in. They may a lot of people are always talking about Pookie and Ray Ray. Well, if she grows up in a neighborhood where she sees them as the alphas and doesn't see anything beyond that, or if she sees the D-boys as the successful ones, she will gradually program herself to only get turned on when she sees those particular type of men. And then that's also, and stuff like that is not just what she's seeing, but what's enforced by her peers, even her family. Really, especially her family. Like if you got some family members saying, hey, Ray Ray on the corner selling drugs, he's sexy. It's like, boom. That's why in certain neighborhoods, some of those neighborhoods, women can see like having gold in the grill is sexy. That's a cultural thing. That has nothing to do with DNA or anything like that, right? Now, I know some people will say, well, all these black women must be programmed to go for Pookie and Ray Ray. No, because everybody isn't in the hood. And then there's different programmings. For example, and I've talked a few times about the world of the black elite, the bourgeoisie, those upper crust black folk, right? The Jack and Jill types, the ones joining like AKA and, they going for like Kappas and alphas and stuff. Occasionally a Q on the low. But, those women, they are programmed. They are programmed. They are gradually programmed, especially if they grow up in that culture, only go for a certain type of man. Those men, they not going to mess with, that's why I always say all women ain't chasing Pookie and Ray Ray, or even most. Because it really depends on their subculture. And it's probably over, I've identified in a blog one time 4 black Americas. So it depends on where someone falls, what they even find attractive, and what they are allowed to be themselves turned on by. Notice I said allowed. Now, the bougie woman, the woman who grows up in that upper middle class environment, she's only going to find men in that environment attractive. Like I remember in this building I used to live in, there was a sister from that environment. And dudes were checking her out. She was fine. She was fine, nice body, but if you didn't have that look of that environment, of a dude from that environment, she just wasn't feeling you. And there was a bunch of dudes checking her out, but the dudes were blue collar. The dudes were from a different social environment. And some of the dudes checking her out, she wasn't giving any attention to. They were educated, had degrees, were making money. She wasn't checking for them. The dude we end up seeing her with was from her background. Right? But, she was programmed to be turned on that way. Right? And you see it also with the so-called hotep type of sisters. The crunchy granola types. If you really pay attention to them, they only go for a certain type of dude. Like if you want to get one of those type, they program themselves to be turned on by some dude with an uncle or whatever who has that look. That's why a lot of times, and I've told people this, and I'm doing some private webinars for the people on my site. A lot of times you can look, if you can ascertain someone's social class, you already know what type of person that they're gonna go for. Like I take a look at a woman, and once I ascertain her general social class, I already know what type of guy she's gonna get hot for. Because that programming is there. Now, one of the things with that programming is interesting. Women can program themselves to like something different. I remember when the whole chocolate brother thing became big, like late 80s, early 90s, right? And I remember this sister. I remember it was Wesley Snipes in particular. And this sister said she found Wesley Snipes attractive, but she didn't at first, right? She didn't. And then another sister had to explain to her why she should find Wesley Snipes attractive. All of a sudden she did, but I just laughed about it. Because I said, nah, she just told herself that. Basically, she programmed herself. Like if you have a critical mass of women who program themselves to like a dude, like a short dude with a hump back and high water pants, just jacked up clothes, guess what'll happen? It's boom. Because yes, there's always the natural attraction, but then there's always the programmed attraction. And it happens with men too. It happens with some men. Like some mature men, they'll program themselves after a while not to mess with a ratchet. But that programming thing is deep, because if you're looking at relationships, and I've said this before because I always quote George Sabiro, who said, Any relationship discussion that doesn't take into consideration class is a joke. Because what the class, subcultures, religions do is program the person to say, this is the type of girl, this is the type of person, man or woman, this is the type of person that you should be turned on by. And so basically, women, they can be programmed to it. Now, I say the way to do it, if I was going to, use Rom's soon to be overly vast resources, the programming would be through the media. Like if I wanted, to get out there that women should be going for the classic man, then I would put out a bunch of movies, books, images which show the classic man as not only being heroic, but sexually viable. And then just sit back and wait. And then I would say maybe in a few years, all of a sudden women are saying, hey, I got to get that classic man. It's kind of along the same lines as when Barack Obama first got elected and women were saying they got to get them a Barack Obama. It's that type of programming. So that's all I got for now. I mean, I go deeper, but y'all got to pay for that. I know Master Teacher BGS is going to go and mess with me. Because I always jump on him for giving away game for free. Going like, Rom, you magnificent bastard. Anyway, y'all, I'll get back with y'all later. I just want to give y'all a tidbit, something for you to think about. Peace and blessings.